This has always been a calling for me. This is not a job. And, like President Trump, I give away the salary. I don't take it. Turns out the Austin Swamp doesn't like it when you challenge some of their most liberal incumbents that are protecting the status quo and that are protecting the deep state. But I've been willing to stand up and fight and do that. And there is no one else in this Attorney General's race that has done that. I will fight for our state regardless of who is on the other side, without fear, without regret, and I will not bend.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to real Texans? Welcome to this edition of Real Texans, where we talk to men and women doing interesting things to make the Lone Star State shine brighter, which sometimes includes visiting with folks who hold or are seeking office. In this case, I am sitting down with Mays Middleton, State Senator Mays Middleton, who both holds office and is seeking office. May, thanks for sitting down today.
Hey, Michael, appreciate you having me on today.
Okay, so you're running to be our 52nd Attorney General of Texas. We'll talk about that in a second. You're small town, East Texas kid. You're born and raised in Wallaceville. Tell me about your transition from growing up in Wallaceville to going to University of Texas, going to law school, that sort of thing.
Well, I know as an Aggie, you had to get a UT shot in there, right? I mean, yeah, I know. I knew
it's
you
a
would.
signal to everyone. He's a Longhorn, but
I know you well. You got to get it. You're going to get an Aggie shot later too. That's just the beginning here.
Yeah.
But grew up in East Texas, just east of Houston, and the values. That is what has really stuck with me. I'm a 7th generation Texan, and think back to our revolution. It actually began in 1832.
Right.
The Anahuac disturbances, which was right in the same county that I grew up in. And, the Turtle Bayou resolutions were a product of that. Patrick Jack and William B. Travis, who later wrote, the Victor Death Letter.
Right.
Which is really one of the finest moments, really in American history, not just Texas history. And what they sacrificed and what they fought for. They were willing to risk it all. They were willing to risk their families, their livelihood, everything they owned. And that began there in 1832. And that was actually signed, the Turtle Bayou resolutions, on my family's property. It was my 5th great-grandfather's land. And this is in my being. This is in my blood. And we will not give an inch to the left. I mean, this is something that is so important to me. I was born in Texas. I'll be buried here. I'm never going anywhere else. All these other states, we're better than the other states. Texas has this history where we fought for our God-granted freedoms. Now, they weren't given to us, and then later on, everyone died at the Alamo. Everyone died at Goliad at the massacre, and then we won it all on April the 21st, 1836. So I think of those sacrifices that were made by our founding fathers, those that really risked everything for us. And that's why this state is so important. And that is why we do not have another Texas to move to, and why this fight matters so much to me. This is something that's in my history. It inspired me to actually later run for office and get involved in the conservative movement. So, of course, many years ago, I was on the board of Empower Texans with y'all. I was on the board of Texas Public Policy Foundation, which is, one of the most conservative groups in the state. It's actually the Heritage Foundation version for Texas is what I really call it. Kevin Roberts used to run it. He's actually supporting me in this race for Attorney General. And then later on, I decided to run for office because I got tired of politicians not living up to their conservative promises. Because it's about delivering those results for Texas. It's not just about talking about it. Because if you talk about it and don't put it into action, it's the same as not believing it at all. And so in 2017, I decided to do something about it and ran for public office, Texas House.
So, okay, well, I want to get there. So let's back up for a second. So you go to UT, I think studied business, is that right? And then
Plan to in finance, went to UT Law,
did
law school. I'm an oil and gas attorney in the oil and gas business as well. America's energy dominance, Texas's energy dominance. That's what I do. Texas is the leader on that. And we also have to be the leader in defeating the Green New Scam, because that is anti-Texan. I mean, they are coming for us. You see what Joe Biden tried to do, with his administration to shut down the industry. And look, who's going to keep the lights on?
Right.
How are our cars going to even function? I mean, this is fundamental to our republic. It's fundamental to our economy. And it's also the come and take it industry as well, because it's rule of capture. And that's why oil and gas, I think, represents what you stand for so well also. It's something that's fundamental to our country. And we need to make sure that we stop our foreign adversaries that are trying to hurt us. I mean, with the Green New Scam, a lot of these solar panels and wind turbines, those are built in China. President Trump has led on this, and we have to fight to back him up on it. So that's one of my top priorities, actually, not just in the legislature, but in the Attorney General's office, defeating the Green New Scam. It's wrong. It's bad for Texas, and they're trying to put us out of a job, really, at the end of the day, this whole state.
So your family, long involved in the oil business, and then increasingly then kind of tied with that ranching operations. When your dad, that increasingly I see as at a very young age, passed away, you had to step into the role of leading a company that might not have been exactly your time. So talk to me a little bit about the importance of this kind of family legacy for businesses in Texas. I think I read at one point that Texas has more generational businesses than any other state in the union. Why is that important to our character as a state that businesses are moving through families?
Well, I mean, we're a state of free enterprise, right? I mean, Texas has always fought for this. It's actually why one of my great-grandfathers started running cattle in Southeast Texas in around the 1820s. Nearly 200 years ago, we're still in the ranching and farming business after all of these years, despite the attacks by the federal government, whether that's regulatory capture, or whether that's regulatory takings, or just outright, where a lot of times they're going to exercise eminent domain to take people's property. We've seen it again and again and again. And frankly, it's by design of the values of that particular industry, right? So, oil and gas is very conservative. Ranching and farming is very conservative. So I know it won't surprise you then that the federal government was trying to attack those industries, especially under Joe Biden and Barack Obama. That's where some of the worst things happens, like the waters of the United States. The list goes on and on and on. So it takes a lot of grit, and it takes a lot of persistence to make sure that doesn't happen in this state. It's tough. Texas is a state that's built on that grit and that persistence. And, you go back to 1836, like I talked about earlier, everyone had died at the Alamo. Everyone had been killed in Goliad. The runaway scrape was happening, right? So families were fleeing. In 1836, they said, it's done. Y'all have lost. No, we didn't give up. We kept fighting. And on that day, April the 21st, we won it all because of that grit, because of that persistence. And that is why I know that conservatives will win this fight in Texas. I have the conviction in my heart to win it, and the left does not. And that's why that I know we will be victorious in this fight ultimately, because we're defending Texas values. That is what we're doing here. We're defending what made us great. And Texas is not like the other states. We're better than all the other states. I didn't even know this. A lot of states don't even have an anthem, and they don't have a pledge like we do. I think 12 or 13 don't, so that shows you right there what we've got is very special, and we have nowhere else to go but here. They've ruined California already. It's done. They've ruined New York already. These states on the left coast, on the East Coast, they've become socialist, frankly. And we are the last bastion of freedom in America. And we're the last one to stand. Florida's doing a great job, but Texas is better.
All right, so you ran for the Texas House, defeated an incumbent in a Republican primary. One of, I think, the first bills you filed, and it's certainly been the first bill you have filed in every subsequent session. We were talking a moment ago before we started filming, in all the special sessions, so a dozen or so times now. You have filed legislation to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. You've now passed it a couple of times as a member of the Senate. Explain why this was explain what got you going on this. Sometimes as an outsider, it has felt a little somewhere between, a righteous cause and kind of the quixotic tilting at a windmill at times. But you've stayed the course with it. Why stick with that issue? There are so many other things you could be doing. Why has that one been so important to you?
Well, that one's pretty easy because this is the blocker to so many pieces of conservative legislation. This is $100 million a year of your tax dollars that are being diverted to the pockets of Austin lobbyists. And what are they doing with those dollars? They're lobbying against border security. They're lobbying against election integrity. They're lobbying against property tax relief and reform. They even lobbied against the Women's Privacy Act. So your school tax dollars were used to lobby to get boys and men into girls' restrooms and locker rooms and showers. I mean, that's pathetic and it's wrong. And look, if you don't like Target, you don't shop there, right? You don't have to pay for their lobbyists. If you don't like Bud Light, which we don't, you don't have to buy Bud Light and pay for their lobbyists. But if you don't like what your taxpayer-funded lobbyist for your city, your county, your school district is lobbying on, quit paying your property taxes, and what happens? Someone takes your home or your business. And going back to when I was on the board of Texas Public Policy Foundation and Empower Texans, I saw this problem because all the conservative bills that we wanted to see happen, all these policies that we were elected to pass, and one of the main reasons why they weren't happening is these taxpayer-funded lobbyists that were in the way. And we were paying for our own opposition, and that's why 94% of Republicans want this practice banned. And is it a hard fight? Absolutely. This is the toughest fight in Austin, period. And that is why I always take on this fight first. Every single session, I will never give up because this is how we're funding the left. The left is basically winning without being able to win elections with taxpayer-funded lobbying. And that's why this is so important. And you go back and look, frankly, this is the USAID of Texas. That's what taxpayer-funded lobbying is. And if we pass this ban, what we have done is we have defunded the deep state, and we have drained the swamp. So all of these other great things that we're talking about, conservative legislation, it makes it much easier to get done because we're not paying for that opposition anymore. I can't tell you how many times in committee where I've seen grassroots show up. They're there because they believe in it. They're there because they believe in the bill or they're against it, and no one's paying them to be there. Right? They're there on their own. They've taken time off work. They've, sent their children to daycare. Someone's paying for that. It's costing them money to be there, right? They're sacrificing to be there because they care about it. But then you go back and you look what happens after that. They finish testifying at probably midnight or something. And then the person right after them is probably a taxpayer-funded lobbyist. I've seen it a million times where then they lobby against their position and undermine them. And they're paid to do it with their own tax dollars. So it's fundamentally wrong that is happening. And that's why we have to pass the ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying, because what it does is increases the voice of our grassroots, right? And allows us to get these conservative priorities done that we were elected to do. And back when I first ran for office in, 2017, of course, had an opponent then that was not doing what he was elected to do. He was not living up to his conservative promises. So I stood up and I did something about it, and I knocked on 6,000 doors and I won. And then with Texas Senate in 2022, same thing. I ran for that office and have been ranked as one of the most conservative members, not just in the House when I was chairman of the Freedom Caucus, but now in the Senate as well, top two most conservative members. And in y'all's scorecard from day one, I've been an A. Whether that's 2019 session, my first session, 2021, 2023, or 2025, that proven conservative record where I've always been a taxpayer champion. It's a lot of votes that go into that. There's a lot of pressure in Austin. I mean, after 20, 30 years, I think, I don't want to date you here, but you've been involved in a few sessions.
All right. So,
and you've seen the pressure by the left and by liberal Republicans.
So you made that transition in 2022. I guess we don't talk about people transitioning anymore. But anyway, you moved from the Texas House to the Texas Senate in that 2022 election, which means that in a 4-year term, 2026, you'd be able to, many times we look at our people who hold office in Texas, United States. You have a lower turnover rate than the House of Lords in England. So being elected to the Texas Senate, pretty safe place to just stick around. You can't run for both the re-election Texas Senate and run for the Attorney General. So you're kind of cashing in after a fashion in your political career by running for the Attorney General. Why give up the sure thing in the Texas Senate by seeking the AG's office?
Because this has always been a calling for me. This is not a job. And, like President Trump, I give away the salary. I don't take it. I don't take the health care. I reject it. I give away the pension. I reject the pension. I don't even take the license plate that can get you out of traffic tickets, right? It is true. Those state official license plates can do that. I reject that as well. I don't take the lobbyist ski trips. I don't take the lobbyist NFL tickets. I am only here to serve and fight for the conservative values that we believe in. I don't want anything out of this job. I just want to advance what we believe in and I'm fighting for. And it is about that next generation as well, because, Macy and I are blessed with 4 little ones. Mm-hmm. Baby's 4, little girl, she's got me wrapped around a little finger, that's for sure, The word no is not, in my vocabulary with her. I know as a dad, the same thing, and then 3 boys, 7-year-old and 2 11-year-olds. But that next generation, that's my daily reminder of what we're fighting for here. And again, we don't have another Texas to move to. We have to get it right for them. And, as a 7th generation Texan, we have to leave it better than we found it. And you do right and you risk the consequences in that fight. And, when I ran for Texas Senate, President Trump said my conservative voting record was second to none. And I've been consistently ranked as one of the most conservative members from day one in office. I never waver in those values, and I have never, ever bent for what the liberal Austin lobby and liberal Republicans want. I've always stood up and fought for those values. And a lot of times, the guys that are ranked on, D and F on your scorecard, I've stood up and gotten involved in those primaries. I have challenged liberal incumbents because I want more conservative policy. I want to move the ball down the field for our great state and advance the values of faith and family and freedom and all the great things that our founding fathers fought for. And sometimes you have to stand up and challenge those, like in the House, that are in the way of it. And I have done that over and over. Macy and I have devoted our time and our talent and our treasure to do that. I know as of you've been in this fight for a very, very long time. And look, that's earned me a lot of enemies. I've got a lot of scars because of that. I've been stabbed in the back. I've got arrows in my back because it turns out the Austin Swamp doesn't like it when you challenge some of their most liberal incumbents that are protecting the status quo and that are protecting the deep state. But I've been willing to stand up and fight and do that. And there's no one else in this Attorney General's race that has done that. I will fight for our state regardless of who is on the other side, without fear, without regret, and I will not bend.
So let's talk about Office of Attorney General. It's certainly one of maybe even more so than governor and lieutenant governor, some of those high-profile positions. Something that folks understand. I think most people kind of get what the job is, at least after a fashion. Largest law firm in the United States. Ken Paxton has, I think most folks would say, has been very effective as our Attorney General. Looking at what he has done as Attorney General, what would a Mays Middleton Attorney General's office, kind of do the same? What would you want to be doing differently?
Well, let's back up a little bit on the record here. Attorney General Paxton has done a great job fighting for our conservative values. And think about how he started, right? Back in 2013, he was running for this office. And of course, he was a civil attorney like me, contracts attorney mainly.
Right.
I believe he worked for Gibson and Dunn and then JCPenney and some other private companies, but that's not why we supported him. We supported him because he had the highest ranked conservative record in the House, and he's one of the most conservative members of the Texas Senate. He had that proven conservative record, and that's why we got behind him in that 2014 election. And this office is the chief protector and defender of our laws and Constitution, but more importantly it's the chief enforcer.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have the most tenacious, the most aggressive, the most unapologetically conservative law firm in America. That's what it is. It's 750 lawyers. It's 4,000 employees. And to do that, it takes a lot of leadership. And I've signed the front of a paycheck. I've started companies. I've run companies. I know where the buck stops. And I know at the end of the day, it takes that leadership in order to hire the very best talent and make sure that we're delivering the state, because you are the tip of the spear. You are the sword and the shield for all Texans and those that also can't fight for themselves. And oftentimes, all the other states follow, right? Everyone looks to Texas. Texas has to be the leader in these fights, and that's exactly what I will do in that office and continue to do. And some of the things that are important, obviously, election integrity. This session, I actually asked Governor Abbott to add to the call the ability for the Attorney General's office to prosecute election-related crimes. Because let's be honest, do we think a George Soros DA is going to prosecute voter fraud?
Probably.
No, they're not going to do that. So that's why that bill is so important, because you got to provide that accountability, because one illegal vote cancels out your legal vote. So that is one of my top priorities, to grow that election integrity division, also create that law enforcement power and allow us to respond quickly, like with election marshals. That's something that I want to do in that office, because we know the deadlines are very short in election challenges. And when someone is defrauding the voters, either through voter fraud, election fraud, or voter suppression, like we saw in Harris County, you got to respond rapidly. And you have to have the tools and resources there to do it. And you cannot count on these liberal George Soros DAs to do anything about it. So that is one of my top priorities in that office, to make sure that only legally qualified citizens are voting. Something else that's very important to me is border security. Border security is national security, period. And President Trump has been a champion for that. Man, thank God he saved this entire nation by winning that election so big in 2024. But it was a mandate for boldness, right? That's what we saw in November. That's what I saw with what voters want. They want a mandate for boldness and bold action in government. And that's exactly what I will do to help President Trump implement that border security agenda and his deportation agenda as well. And one of the top tools in that is the ban on sanctuary cities, because we've got President Trump's administration, awesome help on the federal level right now, whether it's Tom Homan, you go down the list, Kristi Noem. But what we're going to see, and what we are seeing, is local government getting in the way of that agenda right now. And that's where the ban on sanctuary cities comes in. I have zero tolerance for any local government that is in the way of that border security agenda or deportation agenda. And there are three important tools. This is an Attorney General complaint process, and that civil penalties, criminal penalties, and even removal from office. And the rubber is about to hit the road on that, because I fought for and we passed a bill this session, the ICE Detainer Program, SBA. And so right now, there are only about 35 counties that are in that program. We have 254. That shows you how many that weren't in it, right? It's a lot. So starting September the 1st, all the rest are going to have to be in that program. And I can already foresee we're going to start to have problems.
Right.
Because that's where they're supposed to turn over illegal immigrants in jail over to ICE. And I have a feeling that some of the George Soros counties are not going to do that. I am ready to go, and they need to be held fully accountable under our ban on sanctuary cities. Something else near and dear to my heart. I represent part of Harris County.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's Judge Lena Hidalgo. Yes, exactly. She needs to be removed from office, which I can get to later on that one.
no one's life is a waste. Everyone gets to be an example. She's just a bad example for most of it.
It's pathetic what has happened in Harris County. That is the third largest county in America. It's soon to be the second, actually.
Right.
And you see the waste and the fraud and abuse that has occurred there. And that is why, as Attorney General, I want to start a standalone anti-corruption division in the Attorney General's office to go after those examples like the bid rigging we saw in COVID with Judge Hidalgo, and holding those corrupt local elected officials accountable. But it doesn't just stop there. Think about George Soros. He needs to be investigated. What role did he have in the riots in 2020? What role did he have in the No King protests that we had? Some of them got violent, by the way. What role has he had actually in these runaway Democrats that have fled to Illinois and California? And part of that is investigating potential bribery, right? So, was there a benefit conferred by Beto or George Soros to get these Democrats to go out of state and withhold their vote in the redistricting bill, potentially? And that is a felony, secondary felony, 2 to 20 years in prison. And here's the most important part, is if you're convicted of that, you can't ever run for office again. So what that means is if Beto is convicted, we don't ever have to see him on the ballot again. Yeah, I know. That could be one of the silver linings of all of this. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so before we end out our time, you were a grassroots activist when you and I first met. You shifted into being a office holder. What questions, taking off the guy seeking office hat, put yourself back in that, in the maze Middleton of the early teens. What questions do you think voters and activists, taxpayers need to be asking candidates for Attorney General? What are the questions that you want yourself and the other candidates to be asked? What makes me a more informed citizen by asking the right questions to you candidates?
I think two of the most important questions they need to ask are about record and about judgment, right? Because this is one of the most important offices in the United States, frankly. The legislature is only in session every other year. So, who is protecting, defending, and enforcing our laws and Constitution in the rest of the time? And we can rely on the tools, of course, from the legislature, but at the end of the day, this office is the last line of defense, really for the whole country, certainly for Texas. So I would ask those questions. And so you think about one of the other candidates in the race, right? He's attempted to lead 3 times. He ran for state representative, couldn't even make the runoff, right? Talked a big game. I actually supported him, didn't deliver on those results. Then he tried to run for Senate in 2022, couldn't even get enough support to even file for office. And now here's the 3rd time he's attempting to lead. Of course, he's worked for good people and taken orders from good people, but I haven't seen a lot of evidence of what he's done himself, that he wasn't told what to do by actual leaders whose coattails he was riding. And he's had 4 or 5 jobs in 5 years. Running companies, if someone gives me a resume and they've got 5 jobs in 5 years, I'm not going to hire them, because to me that looks like a quitter. But think about the judgment. So what does he do when he comes back to Austin? The first thing after he leaves the administration in D.C., he starts to work for a taxpayer-funded lobbyist law firm. He literally joins the swamp. So you have to ask if, as a candidate, he has compromised himself and then has compromised his values. What would he do as Attorney General? How would he compromise that office? And you think about the decisions that he would make in that office as well. How would that compromise our state also at the end of the day? And, it just shows the judgment that, 94% of our Republican Party is against taxpayer-funded lobbying, but he's gone and joined the swamp. I'm fighting to drain the swamp, and he's literally working for the swamp and profiting off of it. And not only that, the taxpayer-funded lobbying firm that he works for donates Democrats like John Busey and James Tallarico and Trey Martinez Fisher. These are the ones that have fled the state and are quitting on their job. And they're the ones that are actually stopping our ability to pass this map that will grow our Republican majority in Congress and allow President Trump to continue to pass his America First agenda. So that shows really bad moral judgment at the end of the day to go work for the swamp in Austin and become part of the problem that I've been fighting for years to try to fix. And then not only that, it goes beyond that. Think about some of the donors as well. He took a 6-figure check from Dr. Ahmed, who is a wanted fugitive in Dubai. It's a wanted fugitive in Dubai. This is someone that has defrauded hundreds of millions of dollars from taxpayers. It was one of the biggest healthcare fraud schemes in America. How do you even find someone in Dubai? I'm like, where do you call them? I mean, how do you get a hold of someone? Hey, I got to go get a donation from this guy. He's hiding out in Dubai from the DOJ, which he used to work for, by the way. How do you find someone like that? And frankly, I think that's a slap in the face to law enforcement, right? They've indicted this guy. They're seeking to recover waste, fraud, and abuse. Meanwhile, he got a donation out of the waste, fraud, and abuse. And then I will fight to hold those accountable that are committing that waste, fraud, and abuse. That's why I want to start that anti-corruption division in the Attorney General's office. It's not enough to end waste, fraud, and abuse. You got to hold the people accountable that are committing it. And then it goes on beyond that. He took $50,000 from someone indicted for a pharmacy kickback scheme as well. I mean, this shows terrible moral judgment. And these are the kind of things that I normally see from someone on the way out the door from office, right? Like the, D and F on your list that are going to become a taxpayer-funded lobbyist after they leave office. I mean, that's the kind of thing you normally see. I just don't know that I've ever seen that on someone trying to get in the front door exhibiting that kind of judgment. And, you've been involved in this for over 20 years. I'm not putting a number on it. But I mean, have you ever seen someone that is trying to run to be a statewide candidate and started a statewide race for the first time, and the first thing that they do is they go get a job for a taxpayer-funded lobbyist firm in Austin? I mean, have you ever seen that? I don't think that I ever have, ever. And it just shows you that judgment and that character, and frankly, the lack of leadership experience, where I have fought these fights. For the past 7 years almost, I have fought for these conservative values, whether that's the ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying or stopping the radical left's woke gender ideology past the Save Women Sports Act, or passing the strongest ban on COVID vaccine mandates in America, stopping the atheist. I passed the bill to put prayer back in our public schools, going after the radical teachers unions as well, passed the bill actually to make it easier to prosecute predators that are showing pornography to our children. I even went after the woke soda lobby, which said I was racist because I was taking away soda and candy from our food stamp program. I mean, this is common sense. Brooke Rollins, our Secretary of Agriculture, she just signed that into effect this year. Last week. And so what that does is it kicks junk food out of the food stamp program, which is common sense, and the list goes on. I have taken on the hardest fights. I have that proven record. I do not back down. I do not need a paycheck from the Austin swamp. I don't want a paycheck from the Austin swamp. I take nothing from this job. And I have largely followed in President Trump's footsteps to only serve. And look at the arrows he's taken for us, right? I mean, look at the things and the sacrifices that he has made. And I don't wear the gold pen. You see this here, there's no gold pen, and there's a reason why. It's because that doesn't belong to me. That belongs to the voters of my district and the state. They're the ones that own it. It belongs to them. And there are too many, frankly, in office right now that they think they're owed something. They see it as what they can get out of it. And for years, I've been fighting to stop people like that from either voting them out or stopping them from getting elected, because what they do when they get there, it's about self-service and not public service. And that's why the ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying has been the hardest fight, because they make it about self-service, not public service.
All right. So I said, one last thing. This is our conversation will be going out public. Probably, in the second special session will be a couple of days into the second special session. And we'll ask you to read into your crystal ball. Are we going to see the 18 plus items on the agenda pass at some point soon here?
We're going to win. That's the bottom line, is they're going to come back and we're going to win. And we need to continue to pursue every tool on the table. I actually filed Senate Bill 62, and it would make it explicit that if you don't show up for work for 7 days, you're vacated. right? I want this litigation to continue, the quo warranto action that we've seen in the Texas Supreme Court. But not only that, the investigations for bribery. I think that's very important because they could have committed bribery, which would disqualify them from office if they're convicted of that. And the bottom line is this. It's real simple. With Real Texans, when you don't show up for work, you get fired. I mean, we all know this. Well, why should there be some exemption for politicians here? They're not showing up for work. They should get fired. And this is why it's so important, is this map has the ability to draw 5 more seats in Congress. And we don't know what's going to happen in the 2026 election. We just don't know. And if the margin is 5 or less in the 2027 Congress, we know that Texas has saved this entire nation. So this map could save this entire country and allow President Trump to pass his agenda in the next Congress. That's why this fight is so important. And those 18 items, I have a lot of them. Obviously one of them, taxpayer-funded lobby ban. Another one is the Texas Women's Privacy Act. And gosh, you should have seen the opposition to that bill. It was a lot of men in women's dresses with makeup on. And I say that these are men pretending to be women in women's dresses with makeup on, fighting to get into the restrooms with our daughters, with our mothers, with our wives. I mean, this is a spiritual battle that we're in right now. And it shows you how far the left has gone, and I will not bend to the delusions of the left. That is why that fight is so important, because at the end of the day, I will fight to make sure that Texas is the safest state in America to live and raise a family. And top of that fight is protecting our children.
Ms. Middleton, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And thank you for joining this edition of Real Texans.